Welcome to Scouting Movies, everybody. When you watch true crime shows, and we talk about the accused perpetrator of a crime, whether it was usually we're watching something to do with murder, uh, and anyway, you talk about this person that may have committed this crime, and how do your thoughts run about that person? Probably it's pretty negative. It's oh, that person definitely did it. Look how weird they are. Look how psychotic they look, and you're making these judgments based on the information that you have, and uh, probably 90% of the time you're right. Uh, I mean, true crime uh, goes over crimes that are committed, and there's pretty easy suspects, and most of the times they did it. But what if you're wrong? What if the person that you are sure did it and uh, you're thinking all these horrible things about? What if they're an innocent person? What if your own prejudices come into play when deciding someone's guilt or innocence? We're talking about a movie today that um, is a true story of a person who was convicted of killing her baby daughter. Obviously, that's a pretty horrible thing to do. It's even more horrible if she didn't do it. We're talking about a movie called A Cry in the Dark. Or in Australia, it was called Evil Angels, based on the novel Evil Angels. Um, and it's the true story of Lindy Chamberlain, real life tragedy of this Chamberlain family. In 1980, while camping near Ayers Rock, Lindy and Michael Chamberlain lost their infant daughter, Azaria, to a dingo. But what followed wasn't just grief, it was suspicion, media frenzy, and one of the most infamous wrongful convictions in modern history. What began as a horrific accident quickly spiraled into a national obsession, with Lindy cast as the villain simply because she didn't grieve the right way. You've heard the line, "The dingo took my baby," or uh, and you've heard that line over and over again. It comes from this movie. Uh, but behind that punchline, sometimes, is and several parodies and all that. It's one of the most heartbreaking true stories that it's ever put to film. Um, I'm trying to think where I start with this one. Let's strip back the mockery a little bit. This movie is not a courtroom drama in a traditional sense. There is a trial, but the real drama happens outside the courtroom, specifically on television screens, in dinner conversations, in barroom gossip. It is really interesting what this film does, uh, based on reality of a person who was convicted in the court of public opinion. Of a lot of people who didn't like the way that Lindy Chamberlain was grieving, or didn't like the way that she appeared so nonchalant about everything. Uh, you know, people grieve in different ways, but sometimes people don't like the way you grieve. And in this case, they didn't like this. They also didn't like her religious fanaticism, is what they called it. I mean, she was a Seventh Day Adventist. That's not very fanatic, but just some very some things that the Seventh Day Adventist religion did at that time kind of turned some people off or rubbed people the wrong way. And they were very devout members of that church. Michael Chamberlain, her husband, was the pastor of the church. And so they were very devout, and just they kind of, the media and the court of public opinion spun the story as they did it for a sacrifice to their pagan gods, and all these weird things like that. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is that the director, Fred Schapisi, took this story of what happens when you're convicted in the court of public opinion and turned that into a national media frenzy, and what happens when these people are talking in restaurants and in bars. And one person said, "Did you hear about this Chamberlain case? Did you hear about what Lindy Chamberlain did to her daughter?" And it takes off from there. The next person says, "Oh, I heard that it was a sacrifice of some sort." And the next person says, "Wow, did you see that she did X, Y, and Z?" Uh, and it just takes off, and it creates this circus uh, around one little tiny idea, and it blossoms into this horrible, controversy and conspiracy and all of these other things. Um, there's no melodrama really here. It just shows the suffocating reality of a woman being broken down by public judgment because she didn't cry on cue. There's something uniquely painful about watching a character that you know is innocent being fed through the media shredder. A cry in the dark weaponizes that frustration. It makes you sit with it. It makes you realize just how easy it is for people to confuse unusual with guilty. Very dangerous jump to make, but one that we make all the time. Uh, we look at an alleged criminal who was accused of doing something, and because they look a certain way or they act a certain way or they are a certain way, you immediately say, "Oh, they had to do it," even though obviously there's not evidence yet uh, going into a trial. Um, or before the trial, there's not any evidence to suggest that, hey, this person probably did this. It's really frustrating to watch, especially as you know from the very beginning that Lindy didn't kill her daughter. You know that a dingo took the baby, and you have to watch as the media tells the wrong story, as the as people and residents and just general public take it and spin it their own way. It's really frustrating and really horrible to watch. The real story, which is shown in this movie, uh, in certain points of time, is that Lindy was convicted of the murder and spent years in prison before uh, investigators found evidence to show without a doubt that a dingo was the one that actually killed this baby. But she had spent years in prison at that point. Years. What really hits hard is how relevant this still feels. I've talked about true crime. I've talked about social media trials. The film's depiction of rumor, speculation, soundbite storytelling. It feels chillingly modern. We're shown exactly how narratives are built, not from facts, but from feelings and from suspicion, from discomfort, from the public's inability to process grief that doesn't match their expectations. People hear Lindy's voice, they see her composure, and they decide that she has to be hiding something. And then the media turns those suspicions into headlines. One reporter misquotes something, another exaggerates, radio hosts start making jokes, and pretty soon the truth is buried under a pile of sensationalism. It happens all the time. Uh, this was just one of the cases that she was innocent, and the media control and the public opinion took complete control of this case and convicted her. So let's talk about the performances. This is Meryl Streep. I mean, she is the greatest actor ever, and you see it here. Holy hell! Like, this is one of her finest performances in a career of fine performances. Uh, Her Australian accent that she puts on in this film, it's flawless. Uh, you see some people put on an accent, and you can hear the kind of um, the real accent coming through at times or underneath it, and you can't hear that here. She is 100% Australian in this film. Um, but more importantly than the accent, which is amazing, she captures the entire emotional tightrope that Lindy Chamberlain had to walk. She's not here to cry pretty or beg for sympathy. She plays Lindy as strong, angry, tired, and real. It's a performance built on restraint. She doesn't ask for your empathy, she demands it through sheer presence of this film. Uh, she doesn't grieve the way that many people think that you should grieve. She doesn't act the way that many people think you should act if your daughter has been killed. Uh, but does that make her less innocent somehow? Uh, it is a flawless performance from Meryl Streep. Sam Neill plays Michael, and he's also excellent. His performance is quieter, it's more internal, but you can feel his faith cracking. That's the biggest story for him, is that he keeps saying, well, this is horrible, but God has a purpose for everything. And then when things continue to take wrong turns, he has to either rely on that faith that, God has a purpose for this, God has a purpose for that. But when he and his wife's names are dragged through the mud over and over and over again and they're convicted, like at what point do you say, maybe God has nothing to do with this? uh it's painful to watch. uh it's in the pauses that he does things. It's in those half finished prayers that you feel his faith crisis existing here. The chemistry between Sam Neill and Meryl Streep is really good, and that makes the tragedy hit even harder. These aren't melodramatic movie people; they feel like real people stuck in something too big, too unfair. Honestly, if there's a flaw in this movie, it's that A Cry in the Dark can be tough to watch. It's emotionally draining, but that's also the point. It's not trying to entertain. It's trying to make you think, to sit in your discomfort, to ask yourself, would I have judged her that way too? If I saw her acting the way that she would I have joined the throng of public opinion people that said, "Oh yeah, she's guilty. She definitely did it," without a shred of evidence? But would I have done that? It's uncomfortable to think about. So, wrapping up A Cry in the Dark with my final thoughts, it's a brutal, brilliant reminder of how quickly public opinion can override facts. It's not just a film about a tragedy, it's a film about what we do with tragedy, how we shape it, how we weaponize it, and how dangerous it is when we mistake emotional performance for truth. This is essential viewing, this movie is. Not because it's flashy, but because it forces you to question your own instincts, and because the damage done to Lindy Chamberlain shouldn't just be remembered, it should be understood. For that reason, A Cry in the Dark gets a solid A for me. It is impeccably acted by amazing performers. It is sharply written and devastating in its clarity. It's a film that stays with you long after the credits roll. So, have you seen A Cry in the Dark, or have you read the book Evil Angels, or do you know about this case of Lindy Chamberlain, Michael Chamberlain, and their daughter Azaria? Let me know your thoughts. Did it change how you remember the story? Drop a comment, hit like if you've ever yelled at a news report in frustration. Subscribe for more deep dives into films that deserve this second look. And remember, not every headline tells the truth. Thanks, everyone.